8. Although the final blood of sunset is 2 hours in the future, already the sky is a glass of honey. A fringe of cloud haunts the skyline of the sea, and the sea is searching out the secrets of the shells on the wet beaches. Seaweed, the clutch of the crab, and the starfish wait for the next wave. With foaming claws, wave crashes on wave. Hear the shingles sing as the wave sucks and plucks. In his salt armour, plucks and sucks the shingles back. The green gauntlets are greedy for stones. They thrust starfish and seaweed home into the starving sea. This happens minute by minute, from now until the end. A seagull with oil on his fingers skids a wedding spray in the foam. Then he furrows his left wing between the breasts of 2 waves and coils for the land. He beats the salt air and in moments achieves the giant oak tree, circles 2.5 times, and returns to the sea. The tree burns cool alizarin like a leafy candelabra in the evening sky. Its upper flat leaves are rusty with stale salt. Other than the rooks and the night owls, no birds ever cling to its boughs. Perhaps it's the salt, or perhaps, well, its shadow stretches to the roots of the woods. It is grave cold under the shadow, an aroma of decayed mushrooms and the sting of last year's icicles creeps from the shadow. It's always like this when the night is excited. And in summer, the night is always excited. So it's always like this. It was 7 o'clock, 1:30. The children followed Anna around the base of the great oak. She was explaining to them how bark was used by Indians to make war canoes, and also how, when burnt on certain nights of the year, it gave great power. "I don't get you, Miss Spark," blurted out Fat Billy. "I can see the canoe bit, but what the hell's burning and power got to do with each other?" "Billy, listen, and don't forget. Fire is the symbol of power. Like you have power over the gang, fire has power over you. God is in fire. Not the Christ God, but the dark God. How many times do I have to tell you? Tomorrow night, we celebrate God. We will dance to give us power over corn and over ourselves. This tree is magical." Billy's eyes widened to minor saucers. Gilly was frightened. Fear was the order of the weak. "Blood has been spilt, children, acres of blood that you may benefit. Our God believes in blood." The children's faces burnt in the late sun as excitement quivered along their limbs. Her words rang in their brains like Arctic wind on Venetian goblets. Your God, my God, our God is freedom, complete freedom. To do anything, run faster than wind, play till stars are tired. In this tree, the blood is sleeping, waiting for you to revive it. It will give you strength to grow, to be the best, and one day you will take the world by the throat and wring it until the winter is dead and summer lasts forever. So touch the oak. Touch it. Grow. Fever drowsed their eyes as all the children thrust their urgent fingers into the cracks of the bark. Only Gilly did not move. The children were sure they felt the blood and sap rising from the roots, felt the green branches thrusting power into their sticky fingers. The blood and the sap spiraled in their bloodstreams and hit their brains like coarse brandy. Only Gilly recoiled from the oak. She forced the iron fillings in her to resist its magnetic field. She remembered over again her friend, dead amongst the cold roots of this tree. The oak's shadow oppressed her. She felt a scream searching for her vocal cords, whilst the other children slowly pressed their chests, thighs, and then centres to the bark. She edged towards the sunset. A scimitar of sun carved her neck, and then the cold hand out of the coldest shadow clenched her shoulder. Gilly was cut in half by the shadow and the sun. The sun called to her with buttercups, but the darkness won. Anna pulled Gilly back into the shadow. Gilly was very frightened. "Listen to me, Gilly. You must touch this tree. It's the only way you'll ever be able to forget what happened to my sister. Don't you understand? It's like nearly drowning. I have to push you back into the water. Otherwise, you will never be able to swim again." "I want to go home, Miss Anna. Please let me go home. I'm scared." Anna simply took the girl by her shoulders and pulled her to the tree. "Touch it. Touch it." I can't. "You will. You will." "Please, no, please." The other children were so engrossed in wrapping themselves around the tree, they were oblivious to their friend. "No, I can't. I won't." Ruthlessly, Anna forced Gilly face forward against the tree. Gilly pummeled her little fists on the icy bark. In the process, she skinned the knuckles of her left hand. The blood pulsed for a second before leaking out. She had given in. Her body pressed the mildewed bark. Slimy moss stuck to her forehead, forearms, and her knees. She could smell the damp crawling into her nostrils as her blood dribbled into the cracks of the bark. Anna watched the blood. Her face was transformed to a hunger. She was nothing but sea eyes and pin teeth. She ached for midsummer. She ached for the sensuality. She had devoted her life to the potential of extremes. Anything that promised granular excitement, from food to sex, with all that exists between, she experimented in. She worshipped her body and treated it as though it had nothing to do with her, as if it were a valuable field where you could grow corn or turn into a slaughterhouse or build a temple or a brothel. At Bristol University, she had already achieved a reputation as a sex scientist. In the first year, she had gone through the men like an anema. Now they considered her to be a whore. She agreed she was, except she never took money. Perhaps later she would experiment with money. But at the moment she was a hothouse plant and loved it. She realized that she would soon run out of perfumed garden exploits. God would be a good experiment to work on next. The Christ God, of course. Her God was here. Her God was different. He was black ice and summer fever. Sulfuric acid could never gnaw him, but he was easy to placate. A little blood and a lot of frenzy and the odd child's innocence, and he was satisfied for the week. In any case, baby evil is more beautiful than grown-up good. Quickly she pulled the children one by one from their fever in the tree's arms. They had no wish to leave their icy lover. Time no longer was. Trance was reality, and the sun was setting. The final shadows were moving rapidly in thick, dark clots over the summer landscape. The sea was seething. 1, 2, 3 minutes and the sun is lusting for the sea, squirting his liquid amber. He hears the submarine call of the merman and the kraken. The upper air vibrates like a sheet of crystal as the sun lunges into the water. One long hiss of pain and the water devours the fire. There is only the perfection of the darkness. Anna forced the children to watch the epilogue of the dusk. The gnats began to bite, and the bats began to squeal. "Hold hands, children. Hold hands and walk against the clock, round the oak tree. Walk and be glad." And the children obeyed her and began the circle in their walking dance. Then, imperceptibly weird sounds came from their mouths. High vowels, but softly, softly into the growing dark. Anna whispered into the branches, "Widdershins, widdershins, against the sun we walk, against the sun." She and the children moved in a trance, and the trance was possessing them. The first stars would not come. Twilight, dusk, night. On the village end of the wood, 2 policemen patrolled the asphalt, bordering the trees. They exchanged irrelevant snags of conversation. The wood made them nervous. When night rams her shutter over the sun, the wood begins to talk with tree voices. The wood invites, offers dark hospitality. The policemen were drawn towards the trees, but refused to leave their set course. The only way they would ever go into that wood at night was dead. The sergeant clamped his fear under his moustache. He fiddled with his silver whistle, praying the night would get on with it. Then, without warning, a white circle of torchlight hit his eyes. He couldn't see anything, so he shouted the standard. "Hey, what the bloody hell do you think you're doing?" The torch continued to blind him as a black card was thrust under his nose. "Oh, we heard you were here, Inspector Hanlin. You didn't half give me a shake-up." "That was the purpose of my visit, Sergeant," replied the inspector. "Now, my fine men, have you seen Anna Spark go into this wood, or any of the village gang, or both?" "Oh no, sir. We would have stopped them. This wood is definitely unhygienic at night. It sort of needs sterilizing and, well, it's best to keep your nose clean. Shut the odd eye. Keep the nose clean." The policeman blanched under his superior's scrutiny. As it was dark, the inspector no longer wore his sunglasses. "What do you mean by keep your nose clean?" As he said this, the inspector shone his torch up the sergeant's hairy nostrils. "Looks bogey enough to me, and your eyesight's not so hot, I think. So, what do you mean?" The other policeman rescued his sergeant. "Oh, if you'll forgive us, sir, it's 10 o'clock and we have to check the bank, etc. If you need any assistance, please call us, sir." All right. The inspector waved them on their way. Gratefully, they clumped towards the village. I don't get this at all. Gilly is still out. I went to see her parents, and they didn't seem in the least bothered about their 8-year-old daughter being out after sundown. And where's Anna? She whispered something to those kids earlier. "Well, Hanlin, follow your instinct. These woods are pulling me under their branches. They're talking. I must be overtired or something. This village is strange. The sun's claustrophobic. Even the church feels corrupt, and I'm getting nowhere slowly. What the hell's that?" The inspector recoiled into himself as a pheasant barked over his head. Then an owl started hooting. Using his torch like a white fan, he hunted over the wood towards the cornfields. All the night eaters were out now. Look there. No, to the left, there. Those flaps of leather. The flying mice. David moved into the wood. Occasionally he licked the trees with his white torch beam. Everything outside the freezing light was pond black, whispering to purple. Suddenly a clan of bats seemed to attack him, deliberately. They flapped their slimy wings towards his eyes. He ducked and beat them off with the heavy end of his torch. When he had damaged 2 of them, they zigzagged past his face and squeaked into the black. With the assistance of his compass, David now moved quickly. The bats were like child vampires, as yet toothless, but brought up in the hungry tradition. He felt the very weight of the dark. It had physical density and dragged his eyebrows. Fear bubbled out of the damp grass under his feet. Any man who does not experience his hair trying to walk from the top of his head in a wood or a graveyard at night is suffering from a supreme lack of imagination. He should have rung my super. He hates me playing my haunches. He promised me real bother this time if anything went wrong. He said there wouldn't be another. Told me to work by the book. But how can I? When you enter a new country, the old laws are obsolete. And this village is the nearest physical manifestation of fantasy I've ever come across. It has created a new set of rules out of anarchy. And they're not in my police manual. Of course, what's worrying me most is that I'm running out of questions. God could almost exist here if he wasn't dead. And a God does exist here. A power out of the dark and out of the roar of the sun. Yes, yes, and fear's gripping my hair. I've got clammy hands in my bowels. My God, I'm getting bloody morbid. He was running now, and his thought patterns were confused. He scraped them into order. He pulled out the photograph of himself and the little girl that he'd been crying over on the morning train, and shone his torch on it. You were murdered, weren't you, Jenny? Your poor mum and dad lost the apple of their eye. You used to live next door to me until you were found one afternoon last August, pinned by a carving knife to the kitchen table. If I find the murderer of little Diane, it will help you sleep better. I'll tear him limb from limb if I find him. And the inspector ran faster. The children moved round the tree, and then, on the curve of their hearing, beyond the swill of the sea, they heard a flute note, so high it hurt their ears. The squire's pipe flowered over the fields and the woods, and gathered to a fever in the oak leaves. In his garden, with the torn fragrance of roses, honeysuckle, and all the night excesses of midsummer, the squire conjured with his flute. The white horse, now a tear-stained grey in the evening, whinnied his fear, and the squire felt as if he were playing on a slender branch of the oak tree. He sensed the children were dancing to his pipe, rehearsing for the dance of midsummer. Faster and faster and faster, deeper and deeper and deeper, the children's feet beat into the turf. The night grass seemed to grow in their legs. Branches sprouted sharp leaves through their arms to their fingertips. Their mouths were filled with bark. Everything was dancing. Noises snarled through their teeth. Fantasy was coming. Reality was grit on the asphalt. And the asphalt had gone. David rushed towards the dancers, who suddenly broke away from the tree like singed moths when the candle's dead. They recovered quickly. Susan headed for the woods, followed by the twins. Billy fumbled towards the sea, and Anna seemed to disappear. By the time David had reached the tree, there was only a candy ribbon as a reminder that anyone had been there at all. David called out Anna's name 4 times. No one answered. Disconsolate, he moved away from the tree. He suffered the stabs of Puritan conscience. The needles of Oliver Cromwell dug into his brain. He always dressed conservatively, fought his lechery and believed with a cold passion in human dignity. As a detective, he had found his morality a source of embarrassment, and often a hindrance. His loathing of the beast in man expressed itself in hate. He searched his torch beam around the neighbouring bushes. The bushes had nothing to say, and would only make a statement in the morning. Having found nothing other than a foul taste in his mouth, he returned to the oak tree to look for occult signs. And there, under the gnarled maypole, sitting cross-legged, was little Gilly Rowbottom.
"I waited 'cause I knew you wanted to talk to me, mister,"